You're listening to the VRverse, a virtual reality podcast where two friends talk all things VR. Now, let's join your hosts, the VR Realm and Dr. Oculus.
Hello everyone and welcome to episode 35 of the VRverse. This month, got the usual co-host, the very lovely Dr. Oculus, and we're joined by a very special guest, Mark, who is the Director of Engineering at Creatue. Great to have you on, Mark.
Hey, how's it going?
The way we would normally just start for when we've got someone is just give everyone a little brief history of your work as in the VR space, basically.
Sure, do you want me to just start talking?
Yeah, you just
Yeah. I'm looking forward to this because it turns out I've played way more of your stuff than I ever knew about.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've been hey, I'm Mark. I've been around the VR AR space for the past 10 years. 10 years, 2014. Slightly before that even. And in the very early days, I was working on a spaceflight sim called Darkfield. We ran a Kickstarter. It was like incredible reception, but then we decided that that's not really something that we can really build. So we started refunding people. And I've been working on other games like Nighttime Terror, which was a Gear VR launch title back in the day. Also Gravity Lab, which was an Oculus Touch launch title when the the Rift, such a long time ago, when the Rift shipped without tracked motion controllers and shipped with a gamepad. And then the Oculus Touch was the extra peripheral for the Rift. So it was a launch title for that. It was a launch title for the HTC Vive. And then also for the Quest later on. I think you might know one of the other games I've worked on, Superhot VR. I brought that over to Quest and worked for Superhot for the longest time. And I've been working on Thomas Verbaul's Laser Dance, which is still coming out soon. I worked on Technolust in the Rift days, and now I've been working on Starship Home, which is Creatue's inaugural game. It's a mixed reality space game where you turn your living room into a spaceship and you go on crazy adventures and you collect plants and then you go into the dreams of the plants, Inception style, and figure out what's going on in the universe and what's wrong with it.
So a very, very long and impressive history there. So I'm going to go back to my interactions with this. So I looked on my channel earlier, and 9 years ago in the DK2, I sat down I want to say young, he was in his early 30s, version of me when somebody's made a third-person perspective, but it's kind of a first-person perspective game for VR called Nighttime Terror. This is going to be tragic. I'm going to play it anyway. It's a twin-stick shooter, and it's going to be boring. And then about 10 minutes later, I'm like, oh my god, third person has a future in VR. This is dope. Was that you?
That was me, yeah.
Yeah. You changed my perspective, both figuratively and literally, on VR in the sense of I thought it could only be good for first-person experiences. And then after playing that, I was like, oh no, this is fantastic. This is brilliant. And I went looking for any other experiences I could find in VR to the point where I even started shoehorning like Batman and things into it with Vorpex. So I mean,
this was way before. This was way before like Lucky's Tale, which was like the very large third-person game that came out like years after when the Rift launched, right? Yeah. So it's that's a funny one because like obviously initially when we were all like with the DK1, DK2, we were all thinking like, oh VR, you want to be embodying like the character that you're playing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then, so we've tried everything. We've tried. I think one of the funniest experiences and experiments from that time was like something called like Dumpy the elephant, where you literally just have like this massive trunk, and you just like a massive elephant going through a city, swinging your trunk, and
Tell
like
me you were Dumpy as well.
no, I didn't build Dumpy. It's just one of, I think it's one of the greatest, still like to this date, one of the greatest first-person VR experiences that I had. So you had all of the first-person VR experiences, and we've done like there were like iterations of all of them. There was like space cockpit flying, racing, obviously first-person shooters, many of them, pretty much everything. But then at one of the Oculus Connects, I think what they showed off like what then became the actual final Rift. They had a demo called Paper Town, which was just a little city of like paper mache little people. And it was like tiny. It was like a miniature scale in front of you. And that's the one that I couldn't shake. Like that's the one that was like I felt such an incredible connection to. Because you had like these little toy figures in front of you.
Yeah, it's
Coming
like a
to life.
diorama sim, right? Like you could just
Yeah,
make your own little diorama of whatever.
Yeah, I think it was just a static thing, but like just that perspective was so interesting because suddenly, literally, it's like, oh, well, we're opening a whole new world of experiences. Like, VR doesn't have to be just first person, and I mean that might seem obvious now. We've got so many games now that are third person in a really good and interesting way. Like Human Fall Flat, I think might be one of the best examples, where it's like it is a third person game that you're controlling from a first person perspective. And that makes so much more sense, and it opens up so many new like gameplay options. And so when I made Nighttime Terror, that's what I wanted. Like that's why like the whole thing about Nighttime Terror, it's the little toy figures that come to life during the night. So like every environment is just like it's your kid's playroom, it's like the living room underneath the Christmas tree. It's the kitchen, it's in a sandbox outside. So it's like at night your toys have like this inner life and they go around and they fight off the little monsters that would come that otherwise would get you. So I just thought like that's just such an interesting, nice perspective. That one launched on Gear VR, and I think at the time John Carmack was offering to give reviews of games, and I considered if I should like submit it to him. But then I figured, oh well, if I'm not the first, then it just gets drowned in the noise. So after a day, I looked at his offer again, and no one had submitted their game to his review. And oblivious as I was, I just said yes, just go for it. Not knowing that like if John Carmack like tears you apart, that's probably not great. But then he really liked it. He really liked it, and we had really great feedback as well on like how to make the game better, some gameplay loop things. He really wanted to like, just throw a grenade into the little monsters, which I thought was like hilarious, and like a brilliant idea. And yeah, it just became like a really fun game to play on Gear VR, and then later on the Vive and everything.
Yeah, I was watching my video back today. I was just like, that experience, as I say, it changed the way I looked at VR. Definitely for the better. But I was just like, do you know, it's tragic that I've not gone back to this since. And also, it was 10 years ago, and I still wouldn't claim to know what I'm doing now. But the quality of the content is bad. So I was just like, part of me kind of wants to know if I could revisit this in a modern headset in a modern environment, because back in the DK2 days, it was the Wild West. It was just a demo that you pulled off of like the Oculus.
Oculus Share, was it? Was it called Oculus Share?
I thought it had a different name, but it might well be right. It was way too long ago. But yeah, you just basically go on. I would go on every week and just be like, okay, what's new this week? What's been ported over from a DK1 that I can now play in the DK2? And I was just hungry for content. And then, yeah, it turned out that game really struck a chord with me. So I had no idea until we were going to sit down and have this conversation. I was like, I didn't even realize that was you. I did say this to you at Connect. I was like, I'm pretty sure both you and Thomas are responsible for me losing at least maybe 60 plus hours of my life just tweaking something slightly and trying to solve a puzzle that you have created. And I had no idea until I was face to face. I was like, oh wow, this is fantastic. So yeah, I'm gonna shut up now. Sorry.
Yeah. Puzzle games are, I think they're incredibly engaging in VR. Like they combine everything like that you got from like what you get from like a good like Portal 1 or Portal 2, where you have like an incredibly rich puzzle, but then also it's just right in front of you and you can walk around it and you can actually manipulate it much more precisely than you could do on a flat screen game.
Yeah, big time. There was GravLab and Gadgeteer, I want to say. Those two games just sort of no, I'll try it and see where. No, there's a ball gone that way. Okay, I'll just move it just this tiny little bit, and just doing that for just so many hours of my life. That's just like crack to me. I absolutely love it.
You can solve the puzzles like quickly by using a lot of parts, but then the game rewards you in the higher difficulty levels by using less parts. So then you get like into like the optimization phase of it, where like if you wanna like you don't need to you don't have to do it to progress through the next levels. But if you're really like, okay, what is the least amount of parts that you can use in Gravity Lab in a level? Like, yeah, people spend like a long time like optimizing their runs, which they love. So it's like it's been Gravity Lab has been out for like a while. So a lot of people have solved puzzles. I don't have the statistics on me. I think last time I checked, there was like in the hundreds of thousands of levels solved. And yeah, it's like a lot of them are like people really trying to just like fine tune. It's like, oh, can I do with one less part? Just for the uninitiated, like in Gravity Lab, you build like contraptions to bring balls from like one end of the room to the other, and it's set in sort of a sci-fi world, set on the moon, so you've got a bit of lower gravity, which makes it more fun to play around with. And then you got like all sorts of weird contraptions. You got like cannons that shoot balls across the room. You've got little boards that give a little push. You have a whole circuit logic in there where you can build. Essentially, you can build proper circuits if you wanted to. You have signals that being sent on 3 different channels that turn on and off other appliances in the room. It's a great fun game that has been one of the original like Quest launch titles. I think there were 20 of them. And yeah, it's been a fun game to work at, and especially fun to like make new puzzles in. And it got like several updates. It had like a time travel update where like just building puzzles in VR is hard. Like solving them is hard, building them is even harder. But then building time travel puzzles where you have to like mentally keep track of the state of like items in different time frames. That was a really tough one. Like that took a long time to develop those puzzles for. It's like time travel puzzles, man. It's hard. If you ever seen the movie Jumper, I think it was. There was another one that was like a lot of time travel movies. There's a lot of time travel movies where was it Jumper?
I think I've seen Jumper. I was like, wait, the one with Joseph Gordon-Levitt, but that's Looper, isn't it?
That's Looper, yeah.
I think it might be Looper. Yes.
Okay.
That's right. Where people come up with full-on flowcharts for like, oh, when is stuff happening. That's sort of how I felt when I was building the time travel update for Gravity Lab. I was like, no, I need to visualize it to see how these levels can be solved backwards. Then, yeah, good times.
I think with things like Gravity Lab, like you said, puzzle games excel in VR, and I think it's more because you physically feel you're there. You're physically doing them. While on flat screen, you can just feel like, oh, I'm just moving this to here or this to here. But in VR, you feel like you're physically in that space and doing them, which I think gives it that extra edge for something like Gravity Lab being in virtual reality.
I mean, I think that applies to VR in general, right? Like,
Yeah.
you are there with the character or in that environment, or you are like literally doing the thing that on a flat screen you're just sort of miming to do in a way.
Yeah.
And that's why I think I've always loved working in this medium. It's like it can bring you to another world, and you are now physically there. No, you might remember the olden days where we're chasing like that moment of like that feeling of presence, where you just like where you realize you're not looking at like a screen in front of you, but you're actually feeling in the game. And that was like really hard at the DK1, DK2 days, because the technology was still so early that you just couldn't get past the 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 the, the feeling that you're not really there, right? Like we had like the screen door effect on the DK1, DK2, right? And we had the sort of the high latency of the head movement and like the blurriness and stuff. So we never really felt like, oh yeah, we never felt the presence in that world. And then the hardware became just good enough that suddenly you're just there. You put the headset on and you're just in that world. You don't even have to think about it anymore. And I think that is like what then it's like the catalyst why VR became like really good, because like it's just you put it on and you're there. You don't even have to like think about it anymore.
Yeah, the barrier to entry has definitely just got a lot easier to pass. Between just standalone headsets that don't even require these amazing PCs to run them, right down to the onboarding process. It's been a very long process to get here, but I do think that I could literally just grab a brand spanking new Meta Quest, throw that to one of my, I'll say my mother as an example. I could throw it to her and she could probably get it up and running in a week, which is saying a lot for my mother because she's not great with tech and things like that. She's had a me her entire life, so anytime anything technical comes along, she just throws it at me and then I make it do and then give it back to her. But I do genuinely think she could probably get a Quest up and running without any help.
Yeah, I think so. I've maybe only take a week because she's going to be asking you for 6 days to do it for her.
Pretty much, yeah. That's the thing. She
But,
would see it and think, oh, maybe I should take some tablets and try it, because she knows she's gonna get a headache, and then she would walk away. But eventually, once she'd actually just stepped and jumped into it, yeah, she would be totally fine.
And I mean, the Quest is even like a harder one to set up because you also have to set up the mobile phone app, right? Like with things like the PlayStation VR, you just plug it in and it guides you through. Like, I mean, I guess you already have your PlayStation set up, so that works the same way. But yeah, like the setup of these devices has become so much simpler. I mean, the Quest really was the game changer of like, well, here is your all-in-one VR games console, and it'll just be ready whenever. Like, there were so many times during like the early Rift days, and then and also the Vive days, where we had to muck around with like base stations and like 40 different like USB cards to figure out to find the one that can handle like 4 like Rift cameras without like disconnecting. And just setting all of that up, and then you would turn it on and there was like a driver update and now everything is broken again and you need to Google the solution for that. But with the Quest, it's just like you put it on, it's ready to go, play the games. Yeah, the graphic fidelity was lower, but like just the ease of use just made up for it by so much. And now with the Quest being like this device that you can just like put on a little charging dock, so it's like always charged, it's always updated, the game's always updated, you've got like cloud sync with the games and all of that. It's become so much easier to just pick up and play something, which that's what we wanted, right? Like if you compare it to like a Xbox or PlayStation, where you pick up the controller and you play. And it's like if you don't have that hurdle, you actually play more, and developers like us actually, we get to have like the same experience, but then also we get a lot more people that are willing to jump in rather than like having to set up like space stations and lighthouses and all of that stuff.
Yeah, love meta or hate meta, they have put more headsets on more heads than anybody else really I can think that has done that. I mean, you could claim Google did it with a cardboard box, but I don't call that a VR headset. I don't. It was a terrible thing.
Yeah, I think what might have
Yeah, I'm not.
Oh, you go, Mark. Sorry.
I'm not sure if cardboard was like a good thing for the industry.
No.
It's like how many people have you met that were like, oh yeah, I've tried VR and I didn't like it. It made me sick. And then when you keep asking what they've tried, it just turned out to be like a Google Cardboard in a mall or something.
Yeah, and the device inside of it wasn't even like a flagship phone. It was a middle of the range phone, and it was playing at like 3 frames per second, and just no, of course that sucked. I would hate that too. But that's not VR. That's not it. Let's look at this. Look at this thing. This is brilliant. I've had that conversation more times than I would like.
And I think like it is like you don't get a chance of a second chance of a first impression, right? So like these people will like the moment they try something like this, it's an uphill battle to make them like VR. Whereas now, like you can bring a Quest to a friend's house, like as easily as you were able to bring a Google Cardboard and a phone to a friend's house back in the day, and actually let them try something that's like proper, that's like fun and engaging, doesn't make you motion sick. And I think like it's a much better like ambassador for VR than like anything that came before.
It is, and as long as there are people like us that are literally just chucking headsets at people and being like, "Here, you try this thing," and I know so many people that do, that I think it is eventually going to become, maybe in a generation or so, not in headsets but in actual people, it will become just a daily device for a large portion of the modernized world. I think Ready Player One might not be too far of a distant future. I think I'll see it in my lifetime.
Yeah, I think when I first got when I first got into VR, mine was through PlayStation VR 1 because I didn't even PC game. So, and then after getting into that and I got my PC one, I actually just went out and bought one of those like £8 plastic cases what came out after cardboard, just to get an example of what people saw when they use them, because I knew people would use them in work, and I was like you said, I think if I'd put that on before the PlayStation VR, I wouldn't have touched the PlayStation VR. I would have been like, nah, that's not for me.
Yeah, and I think like that thinking of like, we love VR, we love the medium, so we want to share it with other people. Like that sort of, I might be burying the lead here a little bit, but that's sort of what informed how we built Starship. Because in Starship you have these incredibly rich MR experiences that are the dreams of the plants, but they almost serve as like a collection of MR demos that you can very easily hand to a friend. Where like you don't want to give them a full game with your save game and the whole gameplay loop of like, now you have to do this and do that. But no, you can hand them, you can queue up the dream of a plant and just hand them the headset, and these dreams are standalone, surreal little experiences that make great use of MR. And it becomes like the demo reel for like, hey, do you want to try something cool in MR for 5 minutes? And it does support hand tracking, so you just give the headset to them. Though not even the controllers, they don't even bother them. Like they don't even bother with that. And then they just have like fun, like capital F fun for like 5 minutes straight. And that is sort of like what we've learned and expected from like having been in the space for so long. It's like I think what people really want is like they want to share the joy that they find in the medium. And if you have something good that you can give them for like 5 minutes, then other people, you know, will also get to experience that, and they'll share it with their friends and their family.
It's like with your game that sold VR to dock. Like I put in my review for Starship Home. Starship Home was the MR game that actually made me believe MR can be used for gaming properly, because a lot of them are just tacked on experiences, but this is like full blown.
Yeah, it's. I agree. It is an MR game. There are games that contain MR, and then there are MR games, and that is the Mark, stop listening. That is basically like the AAA of MR games that you can buy on the Quest. Is Starship Home, because
I'll take that quote. Thanks.
It is exactly what you want from a veteran's experience like my own, right up to a newbie. And one of the wonderful things about MR, because when Mark goes on stage and we can, blah, 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 and he tells us about all these fantastic features they're bringing to VR, and I was like, I don't care about MR. It's just a gimmick. I'm not going to bother about MR. But it turns out I'm just incredibly short-sighted, because when you think about it, one of the biggest things, and I've always been a massive gatekeeper of this, is we've all seen the video of the guy in the Russian mall in the roller coaster, and somebody like prods him, and he's falling, and he just loses his shit. And so everybody wants to be the guy that prods the Russian guy and then goes, and I hate people doing that. There is a special place in hell for people that mess with people in virtual reality. And the wonderful thing about MR is it can help build that trust. Because you have to think about it. In the past, when you were putting people in virtual reality, you're basically blindfolding them. They are blind to the world around them. And so it takes a lot of trust in order for them to say, yes, okay, I will do this. I'm trusting you guys not to make fun of me. Mixed reality, they put the headset on and they can still see the world around them. So they can feel that little bit safer and still have a great experience in a VR headset. And I think that actually is one of the best things that can happen to VR. And like I said, Starship Home is one of the games to do it. Because they can do that. They can have that experience. You can literally play Starship Home, look after your plants. I don't recommend it, but you could also look after a child, because you can see it on the floor. It's right there. It's I don't know what you do with kids. I don't have any. But I assume that you could put it in a rocking thing and it can sit there and watch Bluey, and you can be in Starship Home, and it's totally fine.
And you can put a plant on your kid's head if it's in the rocker.
There is that, yeah.
I think maybe more realistic might be like a dog or cat.
Yeah.
I have a kid, but I don't have a pet. So it's like I just thinking, it's like the kid will get to places the moment you're not looking. So, but so does the dog and cat. So I'm not quite sure. If just disclaimer: if you need to be responsible, don't play our game.
Creatue does not endorse any of the the visions expressed here. Don't play games while trying to look after children. That's fine.
But I think you're very right, though, that there's like this utility aspect of MR where, like how many times were you like, oh, I can't do a specific thing because I need to wait for the mailman to deliver me this parcel, and if I don't pick it up right at the door when he shows up, he's gonna bring it to some depot where it's gonna take half an hour to get there, and you have to go across the city and to pick it up at like inconvenient time. You can play MR games while still looking out the window and like waiting for the thing that you need to wait for. Or you can do MR games while also, doing the laundry in the background or waiting for something, or just like the utility aspect of not being fully disconnected from the world and, as you said, like fully blindfolded, while still being like fully immersed. If the developer does it right, like I think is immense. Then the other one is that you don't really need to tidy up your room. Whereas like for a VR game, like you get like descriptions like, oh, you need like 6 by 9 feet for your space, or like 2 by 3 meters, or like this is a standing space. So you just kind of need to tidy up your room. Which, if you tell someone like, hey, you want to play this incredibly cool game, but first you have to do your household chores, like they just won't do it. Like that's not what happens. No one's telling you to do the dishes before you can play PlayStation, right? But here we're telling people, hey, you have to tidy up your room before you can play a VR game.
There was a weird period when, was it the Quest 3 was coming out, and VR content creators were like, "Oh, I need to tidy the space now because people are going to look through the headset and they're going to see the trash space that I normally film from the knee up, so you don't see what's below my knees, whereas now they're going to look through the headset and they're going to see everything around me." And I'm just like, yeah, this is awesome because I can see everything around me, so I don't need to actually move this anymore. It's brilliant. Yeah, it's a fantastic. I never even really thought of it in that sense of like, you don't have to be that careful of your surroundings because you're in them.
You also get a larger room, because like if I had to dedicate like some of this room to VR, I just take the inset of like where all the crap is, like so like my so it's like it becomes a much smaller space. Whereas now I can literally, and our game does it. It literally asks you to go to all the walls and play with them. So it really just takes up the totality of your room. And yeah, if there's like a chair in front of it, just walk around the chair. Whereas like in VR, you wouldn't want a play space that's not rectangular because
That's it.
you just run into
As
the
a
chair.
rule, I would try and leave a good sort of couple of feet away from the walls when setting my play space. Whereas with MR, you're so right. You can literally just. I was playing shooting McMR game. What was it? Spatial Ops. I was playing Spatial Ops, and of course, I can have my entire play space because I'm just shooting at blank walls. It's brilliant. I don't have to worry about like punching stuff, which I imagine you've seen some horror stories with Super Hot, though.
I mean, I have. The one fun thing is like one of the first things that they did super hot was build a specific mode for like location-based entertainment, like the VR arcades, because we had anecdotal reports that they were all showing super hot because it was a very popular title, especially at the time, but they stopped then running it because the cost became too high because people kept smashing TVs. Like they usually have like a TV inside the play, near the play space, so onlookers can see what the person is playing. The cost of running Super Hot became too high because like every second session meant a smash TV. So there's definitely that. So one of the first things I did for Super Hot was build a version which just throws up like a massive red wall if you get anywhere close to the boundaries. Which that it lowered the occurrences of people smashing TVs. Didn't stop it, which is a testament to VR, I think, and like good game design, where something becomes so engaging that like you shall not be stopped.
I don't know if you will have definitely seen it. The Gorn Twitter account. The Gorn Twitter account is like 90% of them apologizing to somebody because I was like, I was playing Gorn and I broke my hand and my 40-inch television, and they're just like, yeah, sorry about that. And it's everybody's just like, I'm totally fine. It's worth it. Absolutely worth it. And I think Super Hot is kind of gonna, it's got to be one of those games where people are just getting into it. And
I think
I did like it in the sense that I didn't have to actually move a lot to do a lot in Super Hot. I think it made way for that quite well.
I was quite lucky with Super Hot.
Yeah, I mean,
the first time I played Super Hot was on PC, and it was with a Vive, and those Vive ones are indestructible. I think put more dents in my wall than actually damage on the controller.
Yeah, they were built like a tank, the same as the first the Oculus Touch controllers. They were built to withstand abuse for sure.
Definitely better than the rings of a Quest. Those touch controllers, I've definitely put them through a lot. I'm shocked I didn't literally put them through a lot because my first play space was basically, I measured it in Xbox game cases and it was 3 long by 5 long. It wasn't very big at all. And that was my first gaming play space for VR. Outside of just sat in a chair in a DK2, and I still managed to play like Super Hot and stuff in that play space, even though it was really, really tiny. And I'm shocked. I used to sit down to play games, and there was mirrored wardrobe doors, and I used to just open those so I could swing into the wardrobe. It was that small. But I still, that's the reason why I went Rift over Vive, was purely because I didn't have the play space that you would have for a Vive. So I was like, yeah, I'll just go for a Rift. Still had 3 sensors and 1,000 USB cables because I bought one and it didn't work. So then you buy another one, it doesn't work, and you read on the internet, oh, this one works. That didn't work. Yeah, so it was a magical time in VR. Part of me kind of a little bit misses it, but then part of me's now got more quests than I can throw. Yeah, you know yourself. You have a million of them behind you.
Yeah, I mean it's part history, which is sort of like the OG like DK1, DK2, the Vive Pre, bunch of other like prototype headsets. But then sort of roughly starting here is sort of headsets that are still around that we still need to test our games against. Especially like Superhot, my own game Gravity Lab. I'm doing work for other people, so like most of these headsets from this on out, like not Windows Mixed Reality anymore. I think we can safely cut these out now. But like yeah, we still need to test on them. So it's part museum, part just like shelf of like stuff that I still need like early access to. But yeah, like the wall behind me, it's actually great for like video calls, especially with VR companies. Because a lot of them just like find their headset on the shelf and it becomes like a great conversation starter. I think everyone's like, oh, I've been working at this company for like 5 years, but I've never tried like this headset that's behind you because it was like way before me.
Yeah.
So
there's like a lot of
history behind me.
Vives.
Same. I've got the original Vive and like the pre-production models, but I don't have the Pro. Or I don't have a lot of the the Cosmos line and a bunch of the.
No, that's a straight Cosmos above your head, isn't it? It's not the Elite.
Yeah, that's a straight. No, that's is that? Let me check. That actually.
I think I can see cameras.
No, it has cameras, but it has it might be the Steam VR tracking faceplate on it.
Yeah, it does have cameras. Yeah. I had
camera.
no idea. I've got the stupid NVIDIA blurry thing on, and there is this headset here is actually a Cosmos Elite, and I was like, it does have cameras. I didn't realize it's been on the wall for a very long time, very rarely on my face. Yeah, didn't even realize.
Yeah, but like to your point, that you didn't have to like that why you got the Rift over the Vive with the room scale thing, right? Like Superhot, we wanted to design it for everyone, so like you can move around, and if you have the space, great, but like you don't have to. And I think that thinking of like, hey, we want to make a great game that works for everyone is sort of what I think VR developers like it just needs to be one of the core tenets, like because the market is already so small. We just need to make games that are fun, regardless of what your situation is. Like, and that's like your space, but also like how are you doing with motion sickness, right? Like, because like myself, like I get horrible motion sickness still. Like probably now even more so than 10 years ago. Maybe that's because I've been now 10 years older than when I started, but I also think I've tried a lot of bad VR experiences, and that my threshold of like bad motion in VR has just lowered, because I'm just like, no, it doesn't have to be this way. Because like there are really good ones that don't make you motion sick, and like for the longest time, like I've been sort of championing the like, hey, we shouldn't make people motion sick. I think in a way the industry has like moved past that, because it's a too hard topic to address, and we seem to be focusing a lot on like the players that don't get motion sick anymore. But I still think like you just have to, if you make a VR game that has like artificial locomotion, you should have at least teleport as like an accessibility feature.
Yep.
Because like I like even to this day, smooth locomotion still makes me sick. So I still prefer teleport over everything else.
Sure.
And yeah. I know for some games it's hard to do. There are incredible ways of like getting around it. I've given talks about this in the past, and I think the most recent one isn't online, but maybe I find a way to put it online. where like you can really trick your brain into, accepting the motion much easier than just like straight up just like feeding like a lot of movement into your brain. But the good thing about MR is that you don't ever have that problem, because smooth locomotion, artificial locomotion in MR doesn't make sense, because like your space doesn't move. So you really are like, you really cannot make players motion sick in MR if like, unless you do something weird, or do something wrong, which as like a bit of development trivia of Starship Home, we've definitely done some weird stuff in the beginning that made people motion sick, but it's much harder to make people motion sick in MR. And but it's also limiting in a way as well, because you're kind of limited to the size of the room that you're in. So like there's this weird trade-off that you have of like, how do you make a world that's larger than your living room while all you have is your living room and you can never get them out of your living room.
Yeah, I'm very interested on how you make someone sick in MR. In my head, I'm like, how do you?
I did start thinking like, I'm curious to know how that went, that you can actually make people sick in MR. I don't know.
I mean, let's dive into it. Talk about Starship Home and what we've built and how we've built it, I guess.
I've been eyeing up that plant on your desk as well.
I know, I keep doing that, and the ones behind him. He's got little ones behind him as well.
I'm like, I need the files for that.
It even wobbles.
I'll send you the files, yeah. And then
please do.
The neck is just like a pipe cleaner.
Oh, okay.
So it becomes a little bobblehead. So in Starship Home, the way the gameplay works, right, is that you get a cardboard box delivered that has spaceship parts in it. It went to the right address but the wrong planet. So when you get the box, it's kind of like a postal error. So you take out the first item, which is your like helm, kind of inspired by like Star Trek, of it being like your main window out, but it's also the way you can like receive messages, like the bridge on like in Star Trek, right? So
yeah.
So you take that big thing out of the box, and then you just immediately get a call from the intended recipient of that starship. And they essentially tell you like, hey, I'm a scientist, there's something wrong in the universe, I need to go fix it. I really need this ship. Can you just set up this ship for me and then just fly it back, and then, because I really need it. So you do that, and you just take out all the items and you place them on walls. But then you have like these big view screens, right? So if you, as a developer, you're not careful, if someone gets really up close to them, it essentially turns into VR, and then you can make people motion sick, because then you just essentially take over the peripheral vision as well. So just to jump ahead a little bit, later on in the game, you actually go down onto the surface of a planet via a little remote rover, and we had like this view screen that was really large in the beginning of our development phase, and the rover was just rolling around on the surface of the planet, and it wasn't like high fidelity. It was like more like a point cloudy type thing, like when you see like the visualizations of self-driving cars, kind of look like that a little bit. And if you stood right in front of it and you were moving the rover around, like, I would get motion sick. Because then you essentially just have a VR game with smooth locomotion again, and like all the stuff in the like around you is moving, because it almost fills out everything that you see, and then you get the same problem as like a full VR game. Yeah. Then we tried things of like, oh, how about what if you shrink it? Like if you shrink everything down, then it doesn't make people motion sick, but then it just feels boring. So eventually we settled on this idea. It's like, okay, well, why are we even moving around in this specific phase? Like it doesn't add anything to the game. So how about we just design this incredible vista that you can see out your main window, rather than looking through like the tiny window that is your little rover remote camera.
Sure.
And that's how we ended up with like our planet experience, where you send the remote, you send the lander down, then it broadcasts a feed that your main Helm view screen just broadcasts, and you can look out, and it's 3D, and it's like you have this incredible view of standing on the planet without actually having left your room.
Yeah, the video, I don't know whether it's gonna get eaten up by the MR. The games to play in MR. Now you've got a quest for Christmas, kids. That video coming soon. I don't know whether it's going to be its own standalone video. So I was talking to Mark about this before the show, and I set out to just record 5 minutes of a bunch of mixed reality games to then say, this is what you can play now. You've got a quest. And I played a bunch of stuff, and there's a really great game called Blood, where you're killing unicorns in a space. It's really fun, nice 5-minute game. Jumped into a bunch of other games around the cabin and stuff like that. And then I put on Starship Home, and before I knew it, I had 2 hours worth of video recorded, and I was like, oh, okay. And I made the mistake of putting the airlock on this door behind me, and I was just like, oh, I kind of want to reach into the air, and then I punched the door and was like, okay, I need to stop playing this game because I need to move on and make more content. So yeah, it's such a great time playing in that world that I just had to stop. Otherwise, I would probably still be there now.
Like,
I was gonna ask.
Do you remember where you put your plants?
My plants went into the window there. Yes.
So now when you walk into the empty room, like is it a memory that you have of like you had plants there on the window?
Basically, yeah. I know exactly. I can tell you, I had a window on this wall in front of me. It kind of covered the TV screen. Basically, the TV screen became a window. I had the tiny window in the back corner there. I had the plants down here. I had the main screen on the wall behind me. So I spent the entire video facing away from the camera, which is something I never ever do. And then, of course, there's the one in the ceiling as well. I was like, oh, yeah, okay, I'll chuck one up there. And yeah, like you say, it transforms. There are tentpole moments in. Where were you part of anything prior to this? I mean, I know you've dabbled outside of VR, which we'll hit on shortly, but did you do much before VR? Was the Kickstarter, was that going to be a VR game, or was that flat?
That was going to be a VR game, but before that, how I fell into VR is that in the very early days, I was one of the people that wrote scripts to map the Wii mode to PC games. Okay. That is sort of how I fell into. It's like I think there's like a straight line from like the Wii over to the Kinect into VR. So like the Wii was input without the screen. Kinect was like in a weird way the same, where you had like your whole body, full body tracking, no headset, and then VR was the headset but without the input in the very beginning, right? So so initially I was like doing Wii stuff, I was then doing Kinect stuff, and then when the DK1 happened, I was like, oh wait, that's the greatest thing ever. Like that's the part that's missing, right? So even in the very early days, I've been like experimenting with like a DK1 and like Wiimotes and like, oh, what would be if you had hands? I think presumably you could totally build like a Beat Saber with Wiimotes. That should not be too hard, I think.
Maybe we shoehorn Beat Saber onto a Vision Pro using Wiimotes as controllers. Gotta be doable, I mean,
there's
right?
like there's this slight plug here, but one of our games of the Creature label is Thrasher. And Thrasher is like this incredible. It's made by the person that also made Thumper on
that explains
Quest.
A little bit, actually.
Yeah,
I'll chat to you about this later, but yeah.
I was straight excited for fresh.
And that's like a great that's like a great it's not a rhythm game, but it feels like it because like the music is so in sync with what you're doing.
Yeah. Thumper was my first experience in VR and what sold VR to me. So once I seen it was made by the same people who did Thumper, I was just like, and that's like went high up my list of game things I had to play.
Yeah, it's on Quest as well, not just Vision Pro.
It is, yes.
But yeah, it's a fun game. It's a fun game. It has that same, like, how did someone describe it? Like the sense of like dread that you get from Thumper.
Yeah.
Like existential dread that you feel in Thumper, you kind of feel that in Thresher too. Yeah, the audio's great. Like you can really tell if when a game is made by like an audio person, because like the audio is so incredibly rich and good and just like is like half the experience. It's a great game.
Yeah, so the reason I was sort of asking you about the past is because there are sort of like tentpole moments that hit a certain area and do a certain thing, and now I've forgotten what these tentpole moments were. But basically, I was probably leaning towards the fact that once people realize that the Starship Home is what it is, it's going to be one of those sort of, and it's not weird. It makes absolute sense. The thought of your involvement in so many of these sort of tentpole moments in VR for either me personally or the likes of you, super hot for. I've not had the pleasure of a laser dance yet, but I think that is going to be another one of those. You grab the headset, you go to a family gathering or a friend's house or something, and then you just do a couple of things. You set up the buttons, and then you just throw the headset to people and watch them try and make their way across the living room. We're constantly coming into a magical time in VR. It's always moving forward, and I think that's going to be another one of those sort of tentpole moments where we are just one of the big problems is it is quite a solitary thing. You can't get two heads in a headset. You can't. You have to get two headsets on two heads. And so the ability to just do that and make it a social experience. It's one thing that I liked about the squirrel game, Akron, in that you can essentially get more people involved, even if they're just on mobile phones, because the amount of times that I would be like, look, okay, I'm going to play my way. I'm going to be the tree. You guys, you're sat playing on Candy Crush. You just turn that off, put this on, and we'll play together. And the amount of times that they're just like, yeah, you take my phone, I want to be the tree. And all of a sudden, everybody wants to be in VR again. It's a great, great time.
But harking back to
one of the...
Right, go on.
So go ahead.
As harking back to audio, with Starship Home, well, how did the decision come about to make the plants make the music?
I think we always wanted to have a game that has incredibly rich audio, and especially because we had our musician Equip, which is he's a great musician, and like we had him essentially for the whole duration of the project, and he could make anything that we asked him to do. So we were thinking back from the start that we need the plants to have a way to telegraph to you that they're happy. And our plants in our game, they're not like your typical house plants. They are more living characters that have their own inner life. They don't walk you across your room like there's a game called Ooblets, where you have essentially little plant friends, but they also walk along with you. Not a VR game, but we wanted them to be able to telegraph to you what their state is, and when they're really happy, like how does a plant look more happy than other than just being saturated, right? Like, So we wanted something where we can telegraph to the players like, hey, you've taken great care. Here's like the reward for taking great care of this plant. And having a nice bit of sounds and music they make just felt like the right approach. And initially, we didn't have them sing all the same song, which might be a spoiler if you haven't played the game yet. But like, the more plants you have, each plant is essentially an instrument in an orchestra, and they're all singing the same song, and it's synced between them. So once you have them all happy and healthy, you get like the full ensemble, and you can hear the whole track as it's like meant to be. And Starship Home is a game where we have like a strong message of trying to make the universe whole again. And I think having that come together by just filling out and filling in the music and it becoming stronger and more powerful and just nicer to listen to felt like a good direction to go. Where one of the things that we've done to get to this before we actually had the music written, because it's nice to think about this in abstract, but getting 8 tracks composed just to give it a try, would have been incredibly wasteful. Like, what if it hadn't worked, right? Like, then we would have spent so much on like just creating like 8 individual split out tracks for plants and stuff. So one of the things that we've done to test it is, if you've ever played Outer Wilds, there's like the like you find people like in hidden places, and they all play a melody. And after you find the second one, you kind of realize like, oh, they're playing all the same melody. So there's actually a website that allows you to just listen to all 8 of them, and you can change the mix between them. And so we tried those files in VR, and it was like 80 music is absolutely incredible of that game. So like, no matter, I think just that alone would have made it like seem like it could work. But like, where that was really interesting is once we put them, like those 8 tracks on our plants, and then started walking across the room, the levels change. It becomes this incredible, rich, audible experience, because you're now further away from one plant and it's quieter, and you hear one plant more. And that felt like amazing with that soundtrack. And so we try to emulate that, and we have plants that once they're all happy, they sound amazing. But then what's even more interesting is just walking across the room and hearing the level shift, and one plant becomes much more like in focus the closer you get, and the other plants sort of fade away. And you just keep walking across your room. You go from one corner to the other, and it really feels like you have that connection with the plants just by hearing the different music with them. And that's sort of what we really wanted to get to, because in the end we didn't make a game just like the plants are there for a reason, because in a way, Starship Home is, in a very direct way, Starship Home is like a climate change allegory, right? Like, we really wanted to hammer home like, there's like something wrong in this universe, and you go around and by taking care of plants, and that's how you eventually how you fix it, right? So the plants needed to be something that you care about. Like, that's why you don't just get to chuck a plant into a compost. Like, no, these plants are special. They are precious, and you need to take care of them. And yeah, that just felt so intensely connected with like a feel good music, that sort of our game became like half music game, half plant sim, and then like there's like lots of other things that sort of make that work. The space travel is just like the setting for the feeling that we want to get across in our game. That makes sense.
Yeah.
It got me interested to move back in, because I want to now move. I put all my plants in the same place. Every one, I just put them on my desk, actual desk. And I'm thinking now I need to put one in different corners of the rooms, because as soon as I got them, I just put them on the desk. I've only ever heard the music as distant as I walked away, not hear them all like break out separately, so I'm gonna have to start go back in and move them all around and walk around.
Yeah, it's definitely like if you want to min-max the game, you essentially just put them all next to each other, because then you can, when you vote them, you just go like a bartender filling up shots.
Yeah.
But I think because we have because they're a fairly large size, I think most players at least spread them out a little bit, just for the pure like logistics of like, okay, well, I don't have space for, that like 7 plants on my desk. So I think give it a try. Like, just like make them all happy and move them around and just walk around.
Yeah.
There was like moments when after we built it, I just sat in the middle of all of them, and just even just turning your head, because we use the MetaQuest spatializer, so you get a different mix, even by just turning your head and looking at them. And it's just so incredibly rich, and we couldn't have done it without the team that we had, that is so intensely focused and skilled in audio, that we were really lucky to have like a musician that could just make us like a custom music for like, oh, how would an alien tentacle plant sound like? It's like, okay, it sounds like this. I mean, we heard it, it's like, yep, that's what it sounds like. So I was like, yeah, incredibly grateful to Equip. Go check out his work.
It is definitely a key area, like you were saying about like selling the environment to the player. Audio is definitely, you clearly recognize audio is not an area you can scrimp on when it comes to selling an environment or a location to a member in VR, a person in VR. It's absolutely key that you do that, and putting that kind of care and attention into it, it's going to yield great results. It truly is.
And it's not just that, like, because like you're in the laws that you're in a spaceship, right? So it would have been very easy to give you just a spaceship drone that is just like your engine hum or something, right? But like, and then I think that is probably a good example of one of the hurdles and pitfalls of MR. It's like you're still in your own space. You don't want your own living room sound like the engine bay of a spaceship, right? Like, you have that constant drone and hum, and like we're trying to eliminate noise from like our real world environment. Like, you wouldn't want to live right next to a transformer station with a constant hum, right? That just stresses people out, and that's not what you want. So initially we had like a really strong like spaceship hum and like hull creaking and like all of those sci-fi noises that you could think of, and that just felt wrong in your living room, right? And then I think that's also one of the reasons why we decided for our plans to have music, because what if we could just replace the bad noises with something that's actually pleasant to listen to? And then we tied it into the plants, and like you get rewarded with the little music they play once you're taking good care of it. It became like this feedback loop. It was like, hey, yeah, your place is like neutral. We're not doing anything with it until you do something good to it. Then we give you this little gift.
Yeah.
And that worked so much better than like punishing you with like a noise that you can't get rid of throughout the experience. And like, this is a really big lesson that we've learned. Like, in VR, you can sell the fiction of it being some other place, and then you're fine with it. But in MR, we need to be respectful of your own space, because like we are directly competing with everything that is in your real world. And if you're playing an MR game rather than a full VR game, you probably also want to keep at least some of the awareness of your real world. So we're invading your space, and we learned that if we push too hard into like trying to take over your space, you'd reject it. Because like then it might be as well full VR, but also like you lose all the utility that you had in MR before, like, or it just becomes stressful. Like, one example is we only have a very limited set of items in our game. Like if you have the helm, you've got the storage. It comes out of the floor, so it doesn't take up much space. The airlock, which sits on your wall and is flush with the wall, so it doesn't take up much space. And then you got like a machine that lets you dream with the plants, and a terrarium with little critters in them, which also sits on the wall, so it doesn't take up much space. And we did that, and then the plants, and we did that deliberately. We had versions of all of these that were like appliances that you place in your room, right? Like something the size between of like a microwave and a fridge. Then you had all the plants and like all the little trinkets and all the little stuff. And it just became crowded. Like if you have a great space, like a large space, that's fine. Because then you can maybe dedicate half of it to like a fridge size hologram projector that sits there all the time. But if you're in a tiny space, if you were in that space that you described earlier where you had to open the wardrobe doors just to play it in properly, the moment you put all of that stuff in, you just can't move, you're cramped. And then rather than it being a delightful experience, you're now just managing your space and you're trying not to walk into things even though they're virtual. And that is something that we had to learn, that like there's a balance between adding to your space and like taking over your space in like a uncomfortable way. And
sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, is that one of the biggest sort of unexpected hurdles that you came across, or was there any more that was just like, okay, wow, I didn't think of that was going to be an issue, but okay, well, let's like figure it out.
Well, I think that is probably the theme for the biggest issue we had, because like initially we were like, the more the merrier, right? Like just give me all the things and then just let the player find room for them. But like that's the issue though. Like you don't have an empty spot in your house unless you live like in a super minimalist, designer house. You usually have the space that you have, and you've put something there because there was an empty space and you needed that space to put something. So if we give you this massive thing, it's like, where do you put it? And then it becomes like stressful in a way, because like you need to make space, or you place it in a place where it's like inconvenient, or in front of something that you actually need access to and you need to see. So like that idea that less is more is something that we had to learn.
Yeah.
Then that also gave us the opportunity of like, okay, well, if we can't have that many items, then each item needs to be incredibly rich. And that's something interesting, because we realized that in a very real sense, we're competing with the items that exist in the real world and with the affordances of those items in the real world. So a lot of our items, they're almost like we're almost like product designers, because it is something that sits on your desk in the end. It sits something that you interact with in a very physical way in the end, and it's not just like you point at it and it just does a thing, or it's just like this disposable thing that you just walk past like in any other game. No, it sits in your living room, and it needs to be nice to sit in your living room, or on your coffee table, or on the wall, or somewhere, right? So it needs to be something that actually feels and looks and sounds like the real deal. And that way, all our objects became just a much richer object, or the requirement for them was to be much richer. So we, like, if you like when you play the game, like the haptics on all our objects is just like we had Carson on our team. He did the haptics implementation for most of the objects, and like they're so extremely exquisite. Like you have like this airlock, and you open it, and then you can feel like every ratchet in it. Or when you pick or when you like play with something that's some sort of mechanical thing, you can just feel it in the controller. We're using the MetaQuest Haptic Studio, which is a fairly new thing, and it really lets us offer those haptics really, really well, and it's like an incredible fun experience. Just like just pressing a button. We have like these big buttons, these big push buttons, like oversized arcade push buttons that do things, and like they have like a haptic bump. And it almost has like the quality of like a good mechanical keyboard, where you just like press down and you go past a haptic bump and you can feel it in your controller, and you do that and you just like subconsciously just hammer on this thing, and it feels good, and like that's why it feels good, and it feels like it has weight, and it makes sense. And like we had to really design every single object in our MR game to be that quality, because if one wasn't, it didn't feel real. And if something doesn't feel real while it sits next to your coffee mug, like you reject the whole thing.
Yeah.
It's like in a way, and I was saying in the beginning that we're getting presents for free now in VR. You just feel like you're in that space, but in a very real way in MR, we have to fight for that presence again. If something feels like a virtual object, but it sits in the real world, it ruins the whole experience. It breaks that immersion. It breaks that suspension of disbelief. It's like, oh no, this is just a stupid item that's in a game, rather than being like, oh, this is my plant pot. And the moment you break that, you break the whole idea of MR, at least for our game. So what we really wanted is to like create memories for the player. And that's why I was asking you earlier if you remember where your plants are. Because like we had so many people voice that thought when they took off the headset that something was missing from their room. So like part of like the base reality for you has become like, oh, there's a plant over on that windowsill, or there's like my little floaty like bot friend is just in the room with me and stuff. And we had the theory that this would be the case, but obviously being developers ourselves, we've been playing this game for a year, so it's like for us it makes sense that we have the memory of all these items. But to see other people play it for half an hour and take it off, and like kind of like being somewhat sad that they can't see their plant anymore and want to put the headset back on, that was something that we hoped would happen. Just if you have that emotional attachment to the things in your game, that's I think when you can tell a story that's worth remembering. And that's what we wanted to do with our game.
Yeah, it's like you like you're saying about the haptics. It's something that when done well, it's such a thankless job because people don't even realize it's there because it's done that well.
100%. That's why I want to give a shout out to Carson, because like if you do it well, you just don't know you've done anything at all.
Yeah, seriously, play Beat Saber without haptics. It feels useless. Like the feeling of slicing a block when you don't get that tiniest little just in your controller when you slice a block, it is so peculiar. I've played Beat Saber with weird controllers that don't have haptics, and when it's not there, it's like this is wrong. I can't touch this. I can't play this. And I never even realized the haptics were there until I didn't have them. And it's like is it 2024? Am I allowed to say this? It's like good makeup. If you can't see makeup on a woman, she just looks naturally beautiful, and she's like, yeah, no, I'm wearing like 300 pounds worth of crap. Like that's exactly what haptics should be. If it's too obvious, it's invasive and it's bad. But when you don't realize it's there until it's not there, that's haptics done very, very well. And like you say, the way that the new implementation of the haptics, it's by doing what you do with that, it just adds to the experience, and you have no idea it's even there. It's wonderful, wonderful. So I do like you, I appreciate the people that put the effort into the haptics. I've played games that I can't talk about, but when you speak to the developers, you know I'm on about, John. They think they introduced me to you. The time and effort they put into their haptics, I'm like, I love that you care that much.
It's like, and you just can't cut corners, right? Like
no.
It's like one thing builds on the other. It's hard enough to push like a virtual button that doesn't exist. You don't get the resistance, right? So you really need to do everything that you can to sell that illusion.
Yeah.
And like it depends. For example, in like if you have a full virtual world, players accept that the rules are different. For example, like Superhot, like you just accept that there's now different rules. So if you don't have the haptics on something, that's fine because you're in a computer program, right? It's like no haptics there. But like if you're in mixed reality in your real world, everything else in your room has haptics. Why doesn't this button have haptics? So it's like there's just no escape from it. You need to be absolutely like spot on with like making things as real as possible.
Yeah.
That being said, like the one thing that was one of the big hurdles was graphics, because like in a way you are very much competing with the graphics of the real world, which is photoreal, right? But we just don't have the rendering budget like on Quest to generate like to render something photoreal. Like even in a VR game, it's very hard to create photorealistic graphics. But in an MR game, where the Quest is like essentially you're getting like less than half of the performance of like a VR game, you get that for an MR game. Because the Quest needs to do all of the extra things. It needs to do the pass-through, it needs to do the depth mapping. That all of that has an extra cost. And it essentially the way this works for us developers is we get like CPU and GPU levels. And essentially we can like that's essentially the clock speed of the CPU and GPU. And in a VR game, we can sort of dynamically choose how much we want. We can give more to the GPU, we can give more to the CPU, just to find the right balance for whatever your game does. But in MR, we don't get anything. We get the lowest of the lowest from both sides because the Quest needs the horsepower to actually do the MR. But then you're in this weird situation where it's like, okay, we need to create photorealistic graphics with like by being absolutely limited with what the hardware that we get. So, and I think a lot of other games are either just giving up at that point and just like, okay, well, our virtual objects are going to look virtual, or they're falling into the trap of like trying to make the objects like super realistic, and then potentially not getting there, not reaching that bar, which is a really hard bar to reach. So I think what we've been trying is like, if you could think of levels of realism, like we have the real world up here, and you're trying to push up against that. You're trying to push your virtual objects higher and higher and higher in terms of realism. But you can only go so far. So what we're doing is we're taking the real world and we're bringing the realism down. And at some point they can meet. So we're doing a lot of coloring of the pass-through cameras, and especially in Dreams we go full on bonkers with like how the pass-through looks. But like by lowering the reality of the real world and increasing the realism of the virtual world, like when they meet, that's where the magic happens, because that's what you suddenly accept that this is a different environment, even though it's your living room. And the way we're doing it, for an example, is like when you travel to like another planet and you have like this green gas giant in front of you, maybe tint your pass-through green, but then also we're giving a green tint to the material of all our objects inside the space. And then have the light direction actually come from wherever you place your window. So it does feel like light is sort of like filtering in through your window, coloring your room green, coloring all the objects green. So we bring down the realism of the real world, but then all the objects, the virtual objects and the real objects followed, like, at least appear to follow the same logic. So now they are on the same level. And then that really, at that moment, it really does feel like you have taken your room and your room is now in orbit around the green gas giant. And all your objects in your room, real or virtual, are part of this world. And by doing that, we really get that cohesion that we wanted. And like this is in large part to thanks to Ashley Pinnick, our art director. And she worked on like great games before, like Cosmonius High. She was the co-creator of Tilt Brush. So it's like really great to have that that expertise on the team to get to this point of like making stuff gel really, really, really well.
I would love to be a time traveling fly and go back in time and just watch the development of this. I just watch it from a moment of like a sit down with people and be like, right, we need to make an MR game, right up until what we actually see today. I'd love to just watch that entire journey. I would sit there for a year, respawning as flies, just watching you create this game, because and all of the little sort of things, the little pitfalls, that very much interests me, and I think I could talk to you and bore you to death asking a million sort of questions of like, okay, yeah, where did this start? Yeah, I'd love to just sort of sit and see that entire process, because it sounds.
Hearing all this and like the thought that gone into lighting and stuff like that, it's not something you think of if you don't understand game development. You just, again, it's a bit like haptics. It's thankless because you see it and you don't notice it because it works so well. Like,
yeah, but if it was wrong, you'd notice something is wrong.
Yeah.
So it's like,
yeah,
there's like this, like the way I saw our development is like, there's like a very narrow path that will lead us to the goal, and everything around it is like 200-meter cliffs, and like if we fall off that path, like it's gonna be hard to get back on. And that's how you experience this for the player as well. If we get something wrong, the player falls off that cliff, and the illusion breaks. So it's like the haptics need to be right, the lighting needs to be right, like all the interactions with the objects need to be right. And then it needs to be the right amount of objects. Too little, it feels like you're not doing anything at all. Too much, it just feels like it's just invading your privacy. And like with like every step along the way, like we even had a point where we had like the way our story is delivered mostly is by characters giving you a call on the helm and talking to you. And the starship can talk, and like some other item can talk, and you have a little flying companion bot that flies around, right? Just to get to that split of like, we have people calling in, we've got the starship talking, we've got your little companion bot. That was also a hard lesson that we had to learn, and finding the right balance. Because initially we had a bot that was much more like a character. It had like a much bigger face, a much bigger presence. It had arms, and we realized that players love this thing so much that they want the story to be told by the bot. Like they wanted a companion friend. They wanted a non-annoying C3PO. They wanted that on their ship with them, right?
Mm-hmm.
But all we were able to do in the time was an R2D2. And there's like a reason why R2D2 is much more loved than C3PO, because like it is like you add so much more of your own thought and imagination onto this thing that only can do bleeps and bloops, rather than a character that's just talking to you. So it's like in the end we kind of need to find that balance of like, well, we don't want to have a full-on character in your space, because now all your hopes and dreams are projected onto that character. But we didn't want also just everything being delivered by the ship, because at some point we had the ship being the thing that delivers most of the story. But the ship didn't have a face; it only had like a glowing light, and then it turned into like a HAL 9000 situation, where everyone looked at this thing and at this glowing red eye and was like, well, it's telling me this is fine, but I don't trust it. And there was something weird about a spaceship being the thing of like knowledge that knows everything and gives exposition, because it made your room feel eerie, because your room is the spaceship, and it kind of made your room feel like this thing that will murder you at any moment. So like again, there's like this level of balance that we have to find. It's like, okay, how much can we intrude into your space? So what we ended up with is like these characters that essentially give you a video call, and you specifically, more often than not, you need to accept the video call. So no one's like invading your privacy in your room. Like you're doing things in your room right now. Like you're either watering a plant or, you're taking care of like a real world thing. Like opening like the door to get a parcel, or like drinking a coffee or something. And you get this video call, and then you go and need to accept it, rather than like it auto playing. And in that way, we can deliver all the exposition and all the story, but still have it being controlled by the player. Like they get to decide when to engage with the story. And if they don't want to engage with the story because they're really happy watering the plant right now, or they're just chilling on the couch reading a book while being in orbit around a gas giant, like they can totally do that. And then that way we have like the story whenever they want it, but we're not forcing it onto the player. And just that balance of like finding like the right balance between like what characters are in your space, then like what does your ship do, how's the story being delivered. That was also something that like took us a long time to actually develop and figure that right balance, because no one's done that before. Because like if you're in a VR game and you need story being like told to you, there's so many ways. Like you just have a character in front of you that talks to you, right?
Yep.
Or you have environmental storytelling and all of that. Like you don't get to have those things in MR. Like you don't have environmental storytelling. You don't have like a character just appear in your room, because that can be frightening, right? Like so we really just need to find that balance to tell that story. And yeah, that is like the big theme of like our development, is that yes, MR's hard and VR's hard, and you always find new problems that you haven't thought of. But a lot of them are like mechanical, right? Like, oh, how do we do this in VR properly? How do we do like a menu in VR properly? How do we do locomotion in VR properly? But like in MR, just like that idea of like, oh, we're infringing on your space. That was like the big new one that I don't think any one of us has expected to be a problem when we set out to build this 2 years ago. And yeah, like I think at some point we might share like more behind the scenes footage of like some of the early systems of our game, because like the cool thing about Creatue is that we are fully remote and fully distributed. So like I'm here in Australia, we had other people here in Australia with me, we had people in Europe, people in the US, pretty much like across like the whole world, which meant that like having a single meeting where everyone can be in is just impossible, right? It's like there's always someone that needs to be up at 4 a.m. So it took us a while, but we got into a rhythm where we're just sharing videos of all the things that we're working on with the team via our Discord server. So we have like really good footage of like all the things that we've built over like 2 years, like from like the initial prototype, like gray box prototype of a thing, to like the evolution where like, oh, it gets an art pass, or it gets another design pass, it gets a haptic pass, audio pass, to like the final thing that exists now in the game. And as part of like when we wrapped up the production on this game and we had like a big team call, we went through some of that footage, and it's like really great to see how like some of the early things, like how they evolve, and how some of the early things are like one-to-one still in the game like now. And because like they were like right the first time, and they were perfect the first time, and they kept like being the thing that works. So yeah, maybe at some point we can share more of that. Yeah.
I'm totally in. Yeah, I would love to see that put together in a part of me is like, I don't have the knowledge or the drive to become a documentary filmmaker, but I want to see that so bad that I might try and figure it out. I just want to see that movie and how this game came to be, and the pitfalls and the shocks of just like, wow, that's an issue for us. All right, okay, how do we fix this? And then off you go. I would totally love to see that movie.
I think all of these pitfalls is probably also why we're only one of the few large MR titles. Like there aren't many large long-form MR titles. Like as you mentioned earlier, like a lot of MR titles are like they're an MR mode to a VR game essentially.
Yes.
And I mean, Gravity Lab is like an example for that. Gravity Lab has an MR mode, but it's just you just replace the skybox really, right, with the pass through. And for a lot of games, that's like they don't have a budget that allows to do what we've done with our game, right? Because like if you build a full MR game, then you're really only on Quest 3, especially when we launch, but now also the 3S. But the large player base still has like a Quest 2. That might change like with the upcoming, Christmas and people getting underneath the Christmas tree and stuff. But like it is an incredibly risky thing to do, and you need to be crazy to actually do what we do, what we've done, because it's just so hard. And so you see a lot of MR games where, they either short form, which is great because I think we also need like MR like toys, like really like there's like they've seen several like remote control tank games or remote control like flying games. There's also like this
great for that.
Yeah, it's amazing, right? And then you have things like sort of like a step up from that. Like you have things like Laser Dance that just take up the whole space and have like a unique experience that you can only have in MR, right? Where you turn your room into like this laser maze and you dodge lasers while you go from one end to the other. And then I think the tier above that is something like Starship, and we haven't seen many of that, I think, where you try to tell a long form narrative in MR. And like in a way, I really envy Thomas Van Baal, who makes Laser Dance, because his game is just it's all mechanic. And if you get the mechanic nice and juicy, you're done, right? Like I'm not saying it's easy, and I because I've worked on Laser Dance and I know Thomas really well. Like it is a damn hard problem to solve. But like if you solve it, you're done. For Starship, we had to solve all of these things and then also create like 4 hours worth of narrative content, which it's like that's a tough one. And the fun thing about Starship though is like because you're in a MR, I think we can tell a story differently. It's like my thesis here is that in VR you're always embodying some other character, right? Like you're either like this super soldier, or this spy, or this astronaut, or something, but like you're rarely yourself. Like if you play Lone Echo, you're not yourself. You are inhabiting this robot. You're almost like puppeteering this robot. Like, and that's great because then like you can experience it from some other viewpoint, right? Like, but we wanted to tell a story where you, the player, is still yourself. Because I said in the beginning, like Starship Home is like a climate change allegory. So we felt strongly that the more you can feel like you yourself are part of this universe, the stronger the effect could be on you. And in MR, it is hard to be anything but yourself. In MR, it's hard to pretend you're someone else, and that's why like a lot of the early MR games, like the Cabin, right? It's like zombies are coming into your house. That makes sense, right? Because you are yourself and this is your environment. So I think that's why MR was like uniquely suited for the story that we wanted to tell, which was that you have agency in this universe and you can change things. It's sort of like the overarching message of game. So and that's why we were so excited about when we initially sat down and thought about, okay, what do we do with this game and what direction can we bring this? It always felt like it's gonna have to be a personal story somehow, because you are in your own space, and that's I think why you also form like strong memories in the game with like where your plants are, the experiences that you have, the planets that you visit, because it feels like you are the one going there in your space. It's really hard. It is hard to describe how a VR game feels to people that haven't played a VR game.
Yeah,
and show that. And you as a content creator, like you must know how hard it is to bring across what a game feels like in a 2D video, right?
Yes. Definitely.
And it's so much harder in MR. Because it's like in a way it's like, oh yeah, here's my living room, and here's like the things in the living room. But like the way it feels is much more personal because you feel about your living room. Like only you can feel like you feel about your living room. For anyone else, it's just another room.
Yeah.
So it's like in a way, it's like a really uphill battle to tell a narrative experience in MR. And I think we might be one of the first that like actually have like a long form narrative that actually makes use of the space around you rather than just be like a skybox replacement, right?
Yeah, it's there's. I mean, I don't like to, because at the end of the day, anything anybody's done is better than anything I have done, because I have done none of it. But sometimes you kind of get the impression that Meta threw money at people to add a mixed reality mode, and it is just pure gimmick. And then other times you're like, oh no, this is actually incredibly functional. And I can't see I can't see it without MR. Like it just wouldn't be the same experience. It wouldn't be the same game in VR. It needed to be an MR game.
Yeah, I think if it was I mean, there's many space games in VR, right? But I don't think any one of them make you feel the way Starship makes you feel. It is that connection that you have to the game that you just get by seeing it in the context and in the same environment as that you so intimately know already. And yeah, and yes, that there's many games that just have an MR mode, and if Meta gives those developers money to build it, like that is great because like even those things that are just like an like an added thing to something, like we couldn't have built Starship without having like other games before us experiment in VR, right? Like nothing exists ever in a vacuum, right? And we in a way we need to find the things that don't work to hone down on the things that do work. So this is by me this is by no means me saying that every other MR game is bad. No, like all the MR games are great, and it's just an incredibly hard thing to build. Is like no one of us we thought, because we've been in the industry for so long, we expected MR just to be VR without the skybox. And if you approach it that way, it is easy. But if you actually try to build something incredibly rich, it is much harder than we thought it is. It would be, right? It's just like getting the world believable and feel right is like so much harder than VR, and then just like finding the interesting thing to do in it is also so much harder because like you don't have control over how big the space is. Like you could be in a living room, you could be in like a closet, you could be in like a massive.
I was gonna say, like, what's the smallest possible space you could play this game in?
So we, as part of our testing towards the end and making sure the game can be played everywhere, we asked every one of our team member to play the game in their house and in like the most ridiculous spots that they could find in their house. And so we had someone play the game in a shower.
Okay. Yeah, I was wondering if somebody
while the shower, not a running shower, but like the shower. And yeah, it's playable. Wouldn't say it's a great experience, but like that was our stress test. Like, can this be played in a shower? Yes or no? And so to do that, a lot of our stuff is we don't really auto place things in our game for two reasons. A is the reason that I think auto placement, even like at the time, we didn't have a lot of the scene understanding APIs that you have now on Quest. So we didn't know what is a desk, what is a couch, what's a window. When we started development and we sort of locked down what toolsets we have, we didn't have that. But I also think auto placement of objects can create other pitfalls. So, for example, we have these big windows, right? Now it would be trivial to just say, well, you have a window here in real life. We turn this window in real life into a spaceship window, right? But I'm coming back to like the utility of MR. Maybe you need that window to look out because you're waiting for a parcel. Maybe you need the window because like, you want to have the awareness of your surroundings, right? Maybe you need this door to be a door because you wanna make sure that if someone comes in, you can see them. So by us giving you the items just in a box, you can place them wherever you want, and they make sense. Like you grab them, you put the window over there. It's like cool. That's where the window goes. If you auto place them and we don't get it exactly right, you'd be like, okay, this window is kind of a stupid spot, but I accept it. Or worst case, like, oh no, this window is like super wrong. I can't play this game because I actually need to physically look at the space that the window takes up now. So
I've had games autoplay stuff and it just doesn't work. Like it's in a part of the room that I can't physically reach or something like that, and I'm just like, yeah, this just doesn't work. I've been, lost races and killed because of auto placement being bad. So it's fantastic.
Like, nothing worse than just being behind a wall that you can't get to.
Yeah.
Or like be on the wall, but you can't get to the wall because there's a couch in front of it, and you kind of have to climb over the couch and stuff, right? So like by not doing auto placement, we actually get like we get past that hurdle. But we also then the benefit is also that we get like this dress up moment where you can kind of like dress up your room the way you want it. It's like, oh no, I want this to go there, and it's like, oh no, I want the window to be here. So it gives the player like agency, and it's like fun. It's a fun thing to do. And then the other thing that we do with that is like by you placing those things, you essentially tell us what areas of your room are reachable. Right, like we could very easily just look at like, oh well, you walked over there to place the window there, so now we know that the floor that you walked on, that's an accessible spot. Whereas, as you said, like with auto placement, you don't even know if you can reach something. So then, like for later on in our game, when we go into the mixed reality dreams of the plants, we can use that information to like make those richer. So like you're doing a room setup in our game without even realizing you're doing a room setup, because you tell us about all the walls you have, about all the surfaces you have, about all the areas that you could walk to in your space, and like we would assume that where you place the helm to look out the window, that's like your forward direction, right? That's where you in your room. If you had to think about where forward is in your living room, it doesn't make sense. But if there are games that ask players to pick the primary wall or the primary direction, but that doesn't mean anything in the context of your living room or office or something. But if you get the player to place like this incredibly rich important object, well, you can kind of extrapolate that's what the direction means. So we get a lot of it for free by doing it this way, and then that helps like tie in into our other systems. When we then in the dreams auto spawn stuff, we can then auto spawn them in a much smarter way than rather than just like querying your room. It's like, okay, well, here's a desk, maybe you want something on it. It's like, maybe you don't, maybe because that's where your coffee mug sits, you don't want something on your desk, right?
Makes sense. It's free information that you can use, and people don't even realize. It's incredibly, like, that's years of
these
experience,
lessons that we have to learn. I mean years of experience have not prepared us for MR.
No.
Like we thought it would, we thought it had, and then we again felt like in the early DK1 days of like, oh wait, how does this work? Okay, can this work in MR? And I think that's why I love working in this field so much, because like you get to solve problems that like no one even had the capacity to imagine before, because like no one ever had to deal with like, oh well, how do we prevent you from tipping over your coffee mug in an MR game? It's not a thing.
It has to be so scary as well to do this, because with MR being in its infancy, Meta may turn around and be like, "Oh, we found a totally better way of doing this, and it's going to be done this way now." Change the way that MR is implemented, and your game all of a sudden is just a dumpster fire. Like, it's still that. I imagine you've kind of passed the point where that was a big worry now, probably a year or so ago. But I do feel like there is still big changes that could still happen to MR and completely ruin everything you've done.
I mean, that's 100%, right? Like, this is such a new field, and like the danger of being one of the first is that stuff will change just the moment you release. And like we've seen it, we've seen the SDK change and some of the room stuff, and we're incredibly cautious of like committing to some features that existed at the time when we did the final login for our SDKs and stuff, because we just weren't quite sure if those features will be brought forward, if they'll change, if they improve. So in a way, we're not using some of the most bleeding edge stuff, but we try to build something out of the parts that we know were stable and make sense, and build a great experience. Like, for example, in the beginning, we always thought we needed camera access to build a good mixed reality game, right? Like, so I think Meta has announced that there will be like a camera API that will allow you to get some sort of information from the real world. And there have been experiments of developers that use the it's called the media projection API to essentially screen record their own game from inside the game, and then use that information. Like there are like experiments out there where you can see people like build like reflection probes, which give you really good real world lighting on the Quest right now with what's available right now, I think. And then you can actually have like shiny surfaces that reflect your real world, like virtual shiny surfaces that reflect the real world. And we
sounds
thought,
very expensive, resource-wise.
it's very expensive, but like and I'm sure that all of that gets better, right? Because like if it's not a hack and someone builds it properly, or Meta builds it properly, it could just be a thing that you get at some point, right? So all of this exists, and all of this will still come, and I think MR will change in ways that, again, we can't imagine now, but it's going to get better and better and better. But so we thought we would need all of this like in the beginning. One of the first things I built for Starship was a thing where you can change where you can change the lighting to match your real world lighting, where you can choose out of like 50 different reflection probes, which is again just an image of the environment really. And I got like an office, I got like a kitchen, I got a living room, so I got all these images, and then you can select the one that matches closely to your space. And like what direction is the light coming from your room? Is it like overhead because you've got ceiling lights, or is it coming from your window and you can like angle it? And I thought all of that was needed to build a good MR game. Because my assumption was just like, oh, we have to go as hard and as realistic as possible. So the lighting needs to match 1-to-1. And the more we started building our game and Ash started building out our art style, we realized like, oh no, like what the important thing is that it looks cohesive. And it doesn't matter if you're trying to chase the photorealistic or if you're chasing some other art style. And that's sort of when I realized like, oh, MR games right now, I think players have voiced the same thing. Like there aren't many that use the pass-through coloring in a meaningful way. And we might be one of the few that does it in a meaningful way to actually, it's tied into the narrative and it's tied into some of the like the effects we have in the game. For example, when your starship or your room lifts off at the beginning of the game and it goes through the clouds, you go through this layer of like white clouds, and in that moment we dial up the pass-through brightness to essentially brighten up your room. So it's just like it's really in sync with what you see outside the world, and like that stuff alone is so much more impactful than picking the right reflection probe or adjusting your light color to match exactly the one of your ceiling light. Because it doesn't matter once you color your pass-through. Once you turn everything blue, your ceiling light doesn't matter, right? So it's like we know that MR is continuously changing, but we also realize that we can build an incredibly rich like experience and narrative, like 4 to 5 hour narrative game with like a minimal tool set that we had when we sort of locked everything about a year ago. And that was like really rewarding because like a lot of like it's often said like you know the like that limitations are like the catalyst for innovation, and we had so many limitations on this in terms of like GPU CPU compute budget, what we know about the world, how photorealistic we can get the camera image or not, right? All of these things, a lot of our game design just comes back to like, oh, but how do we make this within the constraints that we have? Like, we don't have auto placement or good auto placement, so let's just let the user place things, and that became such a more interesting thing than auto placement. It's like, oh, we can't change the photorealistic. Fine, let's chase like incredibly like surreal, trippy graphics and get to a point where like parts of the game are probably best experienced like if you're under the influence. Not an official recommendation, just saying.
Sure. Yeah.
And like combining all of those things, like I think Starship is very unique at that because like a lot of these things won't be limitations in I don't know 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line. Like Starship like might just live as this like this cornerstone of like, well, here's where Emma was at the beginning, and but also while yet still not being like while still being like an incredibly rich experience and fun to play and awesome to look at, and like what our hope is that people will get their Quest 3S for Christmas, and they will play Batman. And then they will be like, what else is on the platform? Like, what else is, like, what are the cool things this thing can do? And I think Starship is one of the cooler things that you can do on the headset right now.
Definitely is. It's, as I was saying earlier, there are gimmicks that use MR, and then there is MR games, and this is definitely a tentpole sort of MR game. Admittedly, I'm not going to look very hard, but I cannot think of anything that I would say if you want an MR game, play this. That's not Starship.
Yes, same here.
Maybe there'll be something in between the next 30 days of our lives because Christmas is only 30 days away, people. But maybe there will be something. But at this point in time, this is absolutely like go-to recommendation. If you want MR, then go to the link that's currently pinned to the chat. Go to your MetaQuest app and look for Starship Home because you are going to have a great time. I promise you will. If you don't, I'll refund you. How's that? For the first person that tells me they hate the game, I'll give you your money back.
You know someone's just going to really enjoy it and tell you that now, Law.
It's absolutely fine. Totally fine. I don't care. We are swiftly running out of time. So if there is... I have a million questions and there is not enough time to ask them. I want to know if there's an early prototype where I can play a tiny little marble maze in my Quest. I want to know so many different things.
There might be.
Don't tell me that. It's once again my go-to thing. Admittedly, when I had the Steam Deck running and I was giving demos with the Steam Deck, it was a lot harder to do. Not impossible, but it was harder to do. But yeah, once again, tentpole moment. If I want to show off the Tilt 5, I'm going for Marble Maze. I'm doing it. It is the best thing that I can think of on the Tilt 5.
That's what we played when you came, man. We played Marble. We played some Marble Maze when you came to the house.
Yeah.
Mark's Magnificent Marble Maze. It was a Tilt 5 launch title.
Yeah.
It's also on the I think Qualcomm is showing it on their AR glasses as well. So like the Marble Maze is such a simple game, and it works great on like as a PC game. It works great on the Steam Deck. But yeah, it's like I still want to bring it to VR or Emma or like on the Apple Vision Pro where you can dial in between like the virtual world and the real world, right? It's like
that would work so well.
That would work so well. Not with the game how it's currently built because there's nothing behind you. It only has the environment in front of you. But like you would turn around in Apple Vision Pro and there would be nothing. But like, just the idea of like having like this little toy that you can play in the real world because you're on a bus or something and you need to see when your stop is, or like you dial in or you just turn on the full VR mode and then you're like in this incredibly serene, like apartment over the water and you can just chill and relax. I think Marble Maze is like has a special place in my heart, even though it's just like a tiny little game I built a while ago. But yeah, like I think Emma has like surprised us in like many ways. Like as like from a developer as like how hard it is to build for it. So I don't fault any other developer for not wanting to dive into this because it is one of the hardest things we've done.
It's a niche in a niche. Let's face it.
It's a niche in a niche, and it's a lot easier to market a VR game. It's a lot easier to build a VR game. There's a lot more players, a lot more systems that you can put a VR game on, right? Like only really the Quest 3 does really, really good mixed reality, or like the Quest 3 family. But also it surprised us in like the games and stories games we can build and stories we can tell in it.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe to summarize this thought, and we're getting up to the 2-hour mark, and I have to go as well. But I think because we've been so long in the industry, in the early days of VR and like throughout like the VR it becoming much more popular. In VR we always try to bring the player to different worlds. In MR it's the opposite. In MR we're now finally able to bring those worlds to the player.
Yeah.
And I think that is in such an incredible thing. Like the first time you put on a VR headset, the first time putting on an MR headset and playing a proper MR game, it feels exactly like that. The first time you visited a different world in VR is now the first time. Those worlds being now with you in your space, outside of your walls. And yeah, with Starship Home, being this game that is like chill, but also has like an incredibly fun gameplay mechanic of the dreams and watering the plants and just hanging out and chilling with them and listening to them and taking care of them. Ultimately, like figuring out this mystery that's happening in the universe of Starship Home is such an incredible experience. So, like, if this, like, after these 2 hours, like, if this at all sounds interesting to you, just find us on the MetaQuest store. Don't know, I'm sure there's a link somewhere, but just search Starship Home on the Quest store.
But yeah, we'll make sure that you can. If anybody wants to find it, whether you're reaching out to me or just Google it, please Google it. It definitely exists, and we very much appreciate you taking the time and being so generous with your time, Mark, and speaking to us today. And if there is ever anything we can do, by all means, let us know. There's a good chance we'll be reaching out to you again next month. Last show of the year, we typically do an award show. We pick out our favorite games of the year from various different categories. I'm pretty confident mixed reality is going to be one of them. And well, you kind of already know what our votes are, but we will also have a viewer's choice vote as well. So if you check out the tweets that we'll provide to you all, please go over there and let us know what you think would be the game of the year for yourself. Every year we count up those votes, and the most voted game gets the viewer's choice award. So we'll get you a link to that tweet as well. Write in Starship Home, by all means, please do. It's definitely worth your time. Anything else? Any last minute plugs? Do you want to shout out any socials or anything like that, or anything that you're working on?
Yeah, join our Discord. I don't know the link to it. I'm not prepared for this. But we have a Discord server. You'll find it. It's if you open a game, it's in the game will tell you what it is. It might be creatue.game/Discord. I'm not 100% sure where this leads. If it doesn't, I'm gonna get our web admin to make this a short link. Creatue. Is it? No. Creature.page/Discord. Creature.page/Discord should get you there.
Perfect. I'm going there as we speak because that is a place I definitely want to be.
And so, like, if you have any questions or issues with the game, or just want to hang out with, with other players or just us developers, we're around. We're on socials. If you're a developer and want any tips on building VR, MR games, whatever, you can find me. My own website is Mark-Schramm, SCHRAMM.com, and there's a link to my Blue Sky on it. And you just shoot me a message anytime. Always happy to help. Really think that we are standing on shoulders of giants, and like the more we can help and share about how we've built these things, the more amazing games there will be. So, for any questions, just hit me up. Always happy to help.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks so much for your time.
I'll bring us home.
Yeah, thanks very much for your time and coming on, Mark. It's greatly appreciated. It's been interesting. The trials and tribulations of developing an MR game, like I said, for people like me, who doesn't really know much about development, it blows my mind how much goes into these things. It really does. Yeah, we'll be back next month. It's going to be on the 17th of December, with it being Christmas time, and then the last Tuesday falling on New Year's Eve. So we're going to pull it into the 17th rather than the last Tuesday of the month. But again, thank you very much, Mark, and we will see you next month for the awards.
Thanks.